Guys, it's been a while. Uh, Technical difficulties. Sorry to keep y'all waiting. Like I explained in the previous video, there are three branches of government: legislative, executive, and judicial. I do believe, if memory serves, I was covering section 2 of the first article. So, section 3 establishes the Senate. Again, I'll explain each paragraph of each amendment, each section, each article. Simple, easy to understand terms with the entire text of the article posted either at the end of the video or during the video using annotations. But feel free to download my videos, please. Yeah, you'll actually learn something. Most of the GOP could have done with the refresher course in constitutional law. It's only apt that we have a constitutional scholar as a president. But that's a different blog, different day, different. You know. Senate of the United States shall be composed of 2 senators from each state, chosen by the legislature thereof for 6 years, and each senator shall have 1 vote. Yeah, chosen by the states, not by the people. We didn't have direct elections of senators till 1913. As a matter of fact, that was the 17th Amendment, the one that came after the 16th Amendment, which results in us having to give so much of our money to the government every April 15th. Immediately after this shall be assembled in consequence of the first election, they shall be divided as equally as may be into 3 classes. Seats of the senators of the first class should be vacated at the expiration of the 2nd year, second class expiration of the 4th year, the third class expiration of the 6th year, so that 1/3 may be chosen every 2nd year, and that vacancies happen by resignation or otherwise during the recess of the legislature of any state. The executive thereof may make temporary appointments until the next meeting of the legislature, which shall then fill such vacancies. They're referring to recess appointments. We recently had this come up. When Ted Kennedy died, the state of Massachusetts did not provide for recess appointments. Did not provide for the governor appointing someone to finish out the term. They actually had to go back and pass legislation allowing that. The Constitution gave them that authority. Everyone was starting at the same time during the first Senate session. It was felt that states deserved the same opportunity given to the people, calling their guys to account every 2 years. Solution: divide the Senate into 3 groups, first, second, and third. These terms to be adjusted to coincide with the House elections. Every time you have a House election, you can conceivably turn out the whole House, but you can only turn out 1/3 of the Senate. No person shall be a senator who shall not have attained the age of 30 years and been 9 years a citizen of the United States, and who shall not, when elected, be an inhabitant of that state for which he shall be chosen. Very simple. You have to be 30, you have to be a citizen in good standing, at least 9 years. And you have to live in the state you're going to be a senator from, the state you're going to represent. This is why Hillary Clinton had to move shortly before the end of Bill Clinton's term, so that she could establish New York residency. Otherwise, she would have been ineligible. Vice President of the United States shall be the President of the Senate, which shall have no vote unless they be equally divided. Each House has to have a presiding officer: Speaker of the House, President of the Senate. But we can't have the administration putting their thumb on the scales. That would violate the separation of powers. Solution: unless there's a deadlock, Vice President keeps his mouth shut. It's that simple. The Senate shall choose their other officers and also a President pro tempore In the absence of the Vice President, or when he shall exercise, who shall serve as in the absence of the Vice President, or shall exercise the office of President of the United States. Actually, they didn't word that very well, did they? It's real simple. Like the House, the Senate chooses its own officers. If something happens, say Obama's having knee surgery or something, and Biden has to be president that day, can't be the president of the Senate too. That's where the pro tem comes in. It's not really that common anymore for the the vice president, to be called upon to act as acting president. But back before, in the pre-telegraph days, horse and buggy days, the president went somewhere, he wasn't the president. You had to have somebody stay in Washington and administer the country. That's where the vice president came in. Now, as I mentioned, medical procedures, that's also an exception, to that. What I said, being rarely invoked now. Reagan had several procedures in the 80s, so Bush actually had presidential experience before he was elected. This is also the subject of the 25th Amendment of 1967. We actually didn't have to have a vice president. For instance, Andrew Johnson didn't have to have a vice president. When Kennedy was shot, the collective reaction was, holy shit, what if he'd been a vegetable? We couldn't have forced him out. I guess we could have voted him out. The Senate, the House could have, but it would have been a mess. Better example, Woodrow Wilson. The last few months of Woodrow Wilson's term, he was not seen. He had suffered a massive stroke. The leaders of the respective houses would come to the White House. They would present Mrs. Wilson with legislation which she would then take behind the door to have the president sign. It is widely acknowledged that she was our first female president. She had to have been signing the legislation. Nobody really cared. As long as the government ran, that's all they cared about. The Senate shall have the sole power to try all impeachments. When sitting for that purpose, they should be on oath or affirmation. When the President of the United States is tried, the Chief Justice shall preside, and no person should be convicted without a concurrence of 2/3 of the members. Okay, I mentioned impeachment of the House. When I was covering the House, I mentioned impeachment. That's the equivalent of a preliminary hearing or a grand jury. Now, when it moves to the Senate, that's your jury trial. Guilt or innocence. That's when you're removed. If you're convicted in the Senate, you're removed. It's that simple. You cannot hold any federal office. If they had a federal dog catcher, you couldn't run for it. Judgment in cases of impeachment shall not extend further than to removal from office and disqualification to hold and enjoy any office of honor, trust, or profit under the United States. But the party convicted shall nevertheless be liable and subject to indictment, trial, judgment, and punishment according to law. And this is why Gerald Ford broke records almost, giving Richard Nixon a pardon. It was going to go to U.S. District Court. All Nixon did was get out of being convicted in the Senate. He was about to be convicted, very likely convicted, in District Court in Washington, D.C. He would have been the first former president to go to the pen. This couldn't happen. So, Ford took care of it. Talk to you later about Section 4.